They fired me in a minute. A month later, it cost them millions. I sat in the back of the glass conference room and watched the board try to look excited. On the screen behind the new CEO, bright words flashed in clean fonts: pivot, disrupt, speed, AI first. People nodded like they understood. They did not. They just wanted to stay safe. Up front, Brent Merrick paced like he owned the air. He spoke fast. He smiled wide. He used big phrases he had learned from someone else. Brent was not a builder. He was an heir. After the founder's sudden death, the board handed Brent the title like a gift card. The founder had been Brent's mother, not his father. Everyone kept calling it a tragic loss, but most of them sounded relieved. A new face meant a new story. A new story meant new money. I had seen stories like this before. I had been at Streamline for 16 years. I built the legal framework that kept the company alive when it was small and shaky. I wrote the licensing language that turned one good product into recurring revenue. I fixed disputes before they became headlines. I kept the train on the tracks while other people took photos on top of it. My name is Gideon Hale. For most of my career, I did not need applause. I just needed the work to be clean and enforceable. That was my job. Quiet wins. Safe wins. But Brent did not respect quiet. He clicked to a slide called Cutting Friction. Then he looked straight at me, like he had waited all meeting to do it. Legal keeps slowing us down, he said, casual as a shrug. We're going to modernize. We don't need all that old caution. I raised one hand, polite. Brent, I said, some of our licensing deals have non-standard clauses. If we change the model without reviewing. He did not let me finish. He waved his hand like I was a fly. We don't need to worry about that, he said. That's outdated. You're stuck in the past, Gideon. The sting hit, but I did not show it. I had learned long ago that emotion is a gift in rooms like this. If you give it away, someone will use it. I looked around the table. No one defended me. Not one person. Some of them had begged me for help in the early days. Some of them had called me at midnight when a contract was about to fall apart. Now they stared at their notebooks like the paper might save them. Brent kept going. He talked about lean teams and automation. He talked about AI handling routine legal. He said the company needed fresh energy, and he said it like he was being kind. I already knew what that meant. It meant he was going to cut the old guard. He was going to call it progress. Then he was going to hold a celebration lunch and pretend the pain was efficiency. As the meeting ended, people stood and smiled. Chairs scraped. Water cups clinked. The room filled with fake relief. I walked out calmly, like a person who accepted the weather. But inside, something clicked into place. Not anger. Not panic. Clarity. Because I did not build my career on hope. I built it on documents. On language. On details people forget. And I remembered one detail in particular. Before leaving for the day, I went to my office. The hallway felt louder than usual, even though it was quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The carpet smelled like cleaning solution and old coffee. I shut my door and stared at my shelves. Most people think a job is a role. I think a job is an agreement. And I had an agreement. I pulled out the older boxes from the bottom shelf. Dust rose in soft gray clouds. I did not sneeze. I just kept moving. I found the file I wanted, Employment, 2008. Original. My hands were steady as I opened it. There, on clean white paper, was my signature from 16 years ago. Younger handwriting. Less tired. Still careful. I flipped through pages until I reached the section I remembered. A clause I had written myself. Back then, Streamline was small. The founder trusted me because I protected the company like it was my own. She asked me to help write a long-term structure for key employees. Something that would keep talent from walking away the moment investors came in. So I wrote the clause. I made it simple. I made it legal. I made it hard to ignore. It was a royalty clause tied to licensing agreements I authored. Not a bonus. Not a favor. A percentage. A right. At the time, it sounded tiny. It sounded almost polite. But it was not tiny anymore. Not after 16 years of growth. Not after global expansion. Not after licensing became the company's heartbeat. I sat down slowly and read the lines again. Then I opened another folder. Global Licensing, 2018 Amendment. I remembered that year. I remembered the rush. I remembered how executives pushed paper through like it was a door they wanted to slam. And I remembered something else. The signatures on that amendment had looked wrong. Not all of them. But enough. Some were too neat. Some were too similar. Some were placed like stickers, not ink. I had raised concerns back then, quietly. I had been told to stay flexible. Now I stared at the pages and felt the cold truth settle in my chest. If those signatures were not real, the amendment was not valid. If the amendment was not valid, many international deals built on it were unstable. And if those deals were unstable, the company's big promises were built on a floor that could crack at any moment. I did not smile. Not yet. I didn't want revenge. Revenge is loud. It burns fast. I wanted protection. I wanted fairness. I wanted the simple return of what I had earned. I placed the files back in the folder and closed it like a judge closing a case file. Then I made a list on a yellow notepad. Get copies of my original contract. Get termination paperwork when it comes. Track press releases and deal announcements. Wait for the moment they need me most. I heard a faint sound outside my door. Someone laughing down the hall. I could even guess who. Brent. He thought he was untouchable. He thought I was a relic. But I had built this place from the inside, line by line, clause by clause. And I had kept records the way careful people do. If they wanted to erase me, fine. I would not yell. I would not beg. I would use the one language they respected. Leverage. And I would make sure the ending felt fair. 2 weeks after that board meeting, I stopped pretending. I did not ask around. I did not warn anyone. I just watched. When people want to remove you, they follow a pattern. First they ignore you. Then they label you. Then they restructure. On a Monday morning, Brina, the HR director, sent me a calendar invite. Quick chat, Strategy Room B. Strategy Room B was not for strategy. It was for endings. The room had glass walls so everyone could see you sitting there. It was polite pressure. A quiet lesson. Look what happens when you fall out of line. I walked in on time. Brina was already seated, a folder in front of her. Her smile looked tired. Brent Merrick sat beside her, relaxed, hands folded like he was waiting for applause. Gideon, Brina said softly, thank you for coming. Brent did not say hello. He just leaned back and looked at me like I was an item on a list. Brina opened the folder. We're sorry, she began, but your role is being eliminated. I felt the words hit my chest, but my face stayed calm. Brent nodded once, like he was approving his own decision. It's not personal, he said. We're moving in a different direction. We're pivoting. We're going AI first. We don't need all this. He pointed at the folder like it was my whole life. I kept my voice even. AI can't sign contracts, I said. It can't testify. It can't take responsibility. Brent smiled, almost amused. That's the old way of thinking, he said. You're stuck. We need speed. Brina slid a severance packet toward me. It offered 2 weeks of pay for every year, capped at 5 months. 16 years reduced to a neat number on paper. She watched me like she expected me to break. I did not. I took the packet, not because it mattered, but because I wanted to see every word they were relying on. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Can I get copies of my original employment contract and the termination paperwork? Brina nodded too fast. Of course, she said. Brent stood up, already done with me. Good luck, he said, like he meant it. I left the room with the same calm I had used in negotiations for years. In the hallway, my hands stayed steady. But inside, the math started running. Back in my office, I did not pack up right away. I sat down and opened my drawer of old files. I pulled out the contract from 2008 again and read it like I had never seen it before. There it was. The clause. The one I wrote when the company was young, when the founder's father still walked the halls and believed rules mattered. A royalty clause tied to licensing agreements I authored. It was 0.8% of licensing revenue connected to contracts with my legal fingerprint. Not a bonus. Not a gift. A right. I flipped to the list of key agreements. So many of them had my language in them. My structure. My safety nets. Then I opened the other folder. Global Licensing Amendment, 2018. The one Brent loved talking about now, because it made him sound important. I studied the signature pages again. The same problem glared back at me, too many signatures looked copied, not written. If that amendment was invalid, then every international license built on it was weak. And Streamline's biggest growth story was built overseas. A story is only powerful until someone reads the fine print. I put the papers away and started planning, simple steps. Get official copies from HR. Wait for a major deal announcement. Find the pressure point. Speak only in facts. I went home that night and slept better than I expected. Not because I was happy. Because the fog was gone. When you stop hoping someone will treat you fairly, you can finally protect yourself. 3 days later, Brina emailed me a scanned copy of my original contract and the termination memo. I printed them. I highlighted the royalty clause in bright yellow. Then I waited. And the opening arrived faster than I thought. A press release hit the company's site on a Thursday morning. Streamline to finalize a landmark licensing partnership with Nordhaus Digital. The number in the release made people excited. $160 million. Brent was chasing a victory headline. He needed it. He wanted the world to see him as the new face of success. If that deal closed, Brent would look proven. The board would protect him harder. Investors would clap louder. And if the deal closed under the invalid 2018 amendment, it would also lock the company into a trap. I did not rush. I did not post online. I did not threaten anyone. I wrote one email. Short. Calm. Clean. I sent it to Nordhaus's head legal counsel, Marlo Vance. I did not accuse anyone of crimes. I did not use dramatic words. I wrote. The deal referenced the 2018 amendment. The amendment had signature irregularities. This could affect enforceability. Their team should review the amendment chain of authority before closing. Then I attached only what they needed, the relevant pages, marked, with my notes. I hit send. And I waited. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. An email from Marlo Vance. Not angry. Not emotional. Just one line that told me everything. We are pausing execution pending verification. That pause was not small. A deal that size did not pause unless lawyers smelled fire. By the end of the day, I heard the internal rumor through a former coworker. Brent was shouting. Brent was calling people. Brent was demanding answers. Because now the board was not smiling. Now the board was sweating. That night, my phone lit up with a call from a number I had memorized. Brent. I let it ring. Then a text came in, short and sharp. Gideon, we need you back in the office. We can fix this. Come in tomorrow. I stared at the message. He still thought this was about pride. He still thought he could talk me down. He did not understand what he had done when he called me outdated. He did not understand that he had handed the steering wheel to someone who knew where the brakes were hidden. I typed one word back. Confirmed. Because I was going to come in. Not to save him. To set terms. I arrived at headquarters at exactly 9 a.m. Not early. Not late. Punctuality matters when you want people to remember every second. The lobby looked the same, polished floors, glass walls, the company logo floating like a promise that no longer meant anything to me. A few employees glanced up when they saw me. Some looked confused. Others looked relieved, like they hoped I had come to fix something that was already on fire. The receptionist hesitated before speaking. They're waiting for you, she said, lowering her voice. Conference room A. Not strategy room B this time. The big room. That alone told me how bad things had become. Conference room A was reserved for investors, regulators, and emergencies. When a company uses it internally, it means panic has reached the top. Inside, the atmosphere was tight. Brent sat at the head of the table, jacket off, tie loosened. His confidence hadn't vanished, but it had cracks now, like paint over rust. 3 lawyers were present. 2 internal. 1 external. None of them were smiling. I took a seat without being invited. Brent cleared his throat. Gideon, he said, forcing a tone that tried to sound reasonable. Thanks for coming in on short notice. I nodded once. I didn't say anything. Silence is powerful when the other side needs you to speak. We've run into a complication, Brent continued. A legal question raised by Nordhaus. One of the lawyers shifted uncomfortably. I leaned back slightly. A question, I repeated calmly. Yes, Brent said. About the 2018 licensing amendment. No one said the word invalid. They didn't need to. I see, I said. Brent leaned forward now. We want to resolve this quickly. Quietly. You know how these things can spiral. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each lawyer in turn. Then I reached into my bag. I placed 3 folders on the table, neatly aligned. The sound of them touching the wood was louder than I expected. Folder 1, Signature Verification Analysis. Folder 2, Licensing Revenue Ledger. Folder 3, My Original Employment Contract. Brent stared at them like they were unexploded devices. I'm not here to threaten anyone, I said evenly. I'm here to correct a problem. One of the external lawyers opened the first folder and went pale. These signatures, he muttered. They don't match known records. Another lawyer flipped through the second folder. These licensing streams, she said quietly, all reference the 2018 amendment. I turned to Brent. You built international growth on a document that can't hold weight in court, I said. That's not disruption. That's negligence. Brent's jaw tightened. Why are you doing this? He snapped. You could have come to me. I met his eyes. I tried to explain risks in the board meeting, I said. You waved me off. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I slid the third folder toward him. My contract, I said. Page 9. He hesitated, then opened it. His face changed. I saw recognition flash, then fear. The royalty clause was there, clear as day. 0.8% of licensing revenue tied to authored agreements. 16 years of growth multiplied that number into something very uncomfortable. One of the lawyers whispered, this alone could exceed 8 figures. The room went still. I let it. Brent leaned back, rubbing his face. What do you want? He asked finally. There it was. Not anger. Not arrogance. Need. I want my royalties settled, I said. Cleanly. Retroactive. Based on audited numbers. And the amendment? Brent asked. You correct it legally, I said. With proper authority. Public or private is your choice. One of the lawyers spoke carefully. If this goes public. It won't, I said, cutting him off gently, if you act responsibly. Brent exhaled slowly. How much? He asked. I gave him the number I had calculated 3 times already. 9.6 million. No one spoke. The external lawyer did the math in his head, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Brent swallowed. That's, he started. Less than what a single regulatory investigation would cost, I finished. And far less than what shareholders would lose if Nordhaus walks. The room held its breath. Brent stared at the table for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, 10 million. Final. Confidential settlement. Full release. I considered it for a moment, not because I needed time, but because pauses make agreements feel heavier. Accepted, I said. Pending payment terms and written confirmation. The tension released slightly, like air leaking from a punctured tire. But I wasn't done. One more thing, I added. Brent looked up, exhausted. You will issue a formal internal correction, I said. Acknowledging my role in the foundational agreements. No apology. Just accuracy. He hesitated. Then nodded. Fine. The lawyers began gathering papers. I stood. As I reached the door, Brent spoke again. You could have destroyed the company, he said. Why didn't you? I turned back. Because I built it, I said. And I don't burn what I built. I just stop letting it burn me. I left the room without shaking anyone's hand. Behind me, Streamline still stood. But it no longer owned my future. And Brent had just learned the most expensive lesson of his life. You don't erase the people who know where everything is buried. The wire hit my account 17 days later. No memo. No apology. Just a clean transfer, precise down to the cent, as if accuracy alone could undo 16 years of dismissal. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold and watched the confirmation screen until it faded to black. Money doesn't feel real when you've spent most of your life being told your value was conditional. What felt real was the silence. No inbox alerts. No calendar reminders. No last-minute, urgent calls disguised as collaboration. For the first time in years, no one needed me to fix something they had broken. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, surveying wreckage that proved you were never imagining the damage. I gave myself 1 week. No plans. No announcements. No LinkedIn post about exciting new chapters. Just mornings where I walked without checking my phone, afternoons where I read contracts not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember why I had loved the work in the first place. On day 6, I received an email from Nordhaus. Subject line, clarification request. They weren't asking for advice. They were asking for permission. That's when I understood something important. Streamline hadn't just lost leverage. They had lost credibility. And credibility, once cracked, spreads fast. By the end of the month, 2 more companies reached out. Quietly. Carefully. Each message followed the same pattern. We were advised you understand legacy licensing frameworks better than anyone. That phrase stayed with me. Legacy. For years, Brent had used it like an insult. Outdated. Old guard. Replaceable. Now it was currency. I didn't respond immediately. I spent time building something instead. Not a firm. A boundary. I registered a small consultancy under a name no one could attach to Streamline, no family references, no legacy branding. Just a clean slate and a narrow focus. Contract integrity. Risk prevention. Truth before growth. The first client signed a retainer larger than my old annual bonus. The second asked me to audit agreements before expansion. The third asked a single question during our initial call. Can you tell us what not to do? I smiled for the first time in months. Yes, I said. That's actually my specialty. Meanwhile, across town, things were unraveling. Not dramatically. Not with headlines. With hesitation. Contractors paused. Partners requested revisions. Investors asked for additional assurances. Brent tried to project confidence, but confidence without competence is just noise. He sent one final email. Short. Carefully worded. We are restructuring leadership to stabilize operations. I hope you're well. I didn't reply. Closure isn't something you grant others. It's something you take. 2 months later, I was invited to speak at a closed-door legal roundtable. No press. No live stream. Just people who actually read footnotes. Someone asked about Streamline. I answered without emotion. They expanded faster than their paperwork, I said. That's not innovation. That's gambling. No one argued. After the session, a woman approached me. Gray hair. Sharp eyes. Calm voice. I spent 25 years cleaning up after founders' children, she said. You did something most people don't. What's that? I asked. You walked away with dignity intact. I thought about that on the train ride home. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't trend. But it lasts. That night, I opened an old folder on my laptop. The very first agreement I had ever drafted. I read it slowly, not for flaws, but for intention. I had been careful even then. Honest. Precise. I hadn't lost that. I had just forgotten that it belonged to me. By the time winter settled in, my calendar was full, but different. No emergencies. No chaos disguised as ambition. Just work that respected time, expertise, and limits. One evening, I passed the Streamline building on my way home. Lights were still on. But fewer than before. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. Which was better? Because distance is what lets you see clearly. And clearly, I could finally say this. They didn't underestimate me. They misunderstood me. And that misunderstanding cost them far more than it ever cost me. Success doesn't announce itself the way failure does. Failure is loud. It demands witnesses. It wants explanations. Success, real success, settles quietly into your life and waits to see if you're ready to keep it. By spring, I was working more than I ever had at Streamline, but none of it felt heavy. The difference wasn't hours. It was consent. Every contract I touched now came with a question, not a command. Can you review this? Can you help us understand the risk? Can you slow us down before we hurt ourselves? For the first time in my career, people didn't want speed. They wanted clarity. That shift changes how you breathe. I moved offices, not to impress anyone, just to separate past from present. The new place was smaller, quieter, with a window that overlooked nothing special. No skyline. No glass tower reflections. Just brick, sky, and the honest noise of the city doing its work. One afternoon, as I was finishing a call, my phone buzzed with a message I hadn't expected. Unknown number. This is Kayla. From Streamline. I hope it's okay to reach out. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. She had always looked tired. Even when things were good. I replied. Me. It's fine. What's going on? Her response came quickly, like she'd been waiting. Kayla. I'm leaving. Gave notice today. I wanted to say. I'm sorry. For how things ended. I exhaled slowly. That apology wasn't for me. It was for her. Me. You don't owe me anything. I hope your next place treats you better. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Kayla. They won't admit it publicly, but losing you changed everything. Meetings are chaos. No one trusts the documents anymore. That sentence landed heavier than any check ever had. Not because it felt like revenge. Because it confirmed the truth I'd spent years doubting. I hadn't been invisible. I'd been essential. And essential people don't need to stay where they aren't valued. 2 weeks later, I heard through an industry contact that Brent was stepping back temporarily. The phrasing was careful. Corporate. Vague enough to hide panic. The board brought in an interim executive, someone older, quieter, with a reputation for cleaning messes without asking who made them. The first thing he did? Order a full audit. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. That chapter had closed without me needing to slam the cover. Around that time, I received an invitation that surprised me more than any contract. A law school wanted me to guest lecture. Topic: risk, responsibility, and the myth of disruption. I almost said no. Public speaking had never been my thing. Too much noise. Too many people misunderstanding the point. But something about it felt right. Standing in front of that classroom, I saw faces like mine from years ago, sharp, tired, hopeful, convinced that competence alone would protect them. It won't. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them the truth. That loyalty without leverage is charity. That silence is not professionalism, it's often fear. That if you build something valuable, you must also build an exit. Afterward, a student stayed behind. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. How did you know when it was time to leave? I thought about it. I didn't, I said. I knew when staying would cost me myself. That answer stayed with me longer than the lecture did. Late one night, months after the settlement, I received one final message. An email this time. From Brent. No subject line. Just a paragraph. He wrote that he was sorry. That he hadn't understood how the company worked. That he'd mistaken inheritance for leadership. That he hoped, someday, to rebuild something that mattered. I read it once. Then I archived it. Forgiveness doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like release. By summer, my work had stabilized into something sustainable. Predictable. Grounded. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I was choosing. On a quiet Friday evening, I poured myself a drink and stood by the window of my apartment, watching the city settle into dusk. 16 years earlier, I had believed success meant being indispensable. Now I understood something better. Success is being free enough to walk away, and skilled enough that the world still opens its doors when you do. I didn't burn the bridge. I simply stopped crossing it. And that made all the difference. The last thing people expect after a war is quiet. They imagine celebration. Victory speeches. Champagne. They imagine revenge tasting sweet and loud. But real endings don't sound like that. They sound like a door closing gently so it doesn't wake the past. By the end of the year, my life had settled into a rhythm that would have terrified the person I used to be. There were no emergency calls. No late night, we need this fixed now, emails. No constant low-grade anxiety humming under my skin like faulty wiring. I woke up without dread. That alone felt illegal. The settlement money sat where it belonged, invested, untouched, boring. I didn't spend it to prove anything. I didn't upgrade my apartment or buy symbols of success. I had already owned those once, back when success meant approval. Now it meant autonomy. I took on work selectively. 3 firms. All mid-sized. All run by people who listened before they spoke. They didn't want a savior. They wanted a partner who would tell them when they were wrong. That kind of honesty has value. One afternoon, a junior associate at one of the firms asked me something that stopped me cold. Why do you always read contracts backward? I smiled. Because the end tells you what people are really afraid of. That answer made sense to her. It would have confused the man I used to be. Time passed. Quietly. Productively. Then one evening, as winter started to thin, I ran into someone I hadn't expected. Not Brent. Someone smaller. Someone who used to sit 2 doors down from me at Streamline. Evan. He'd been a junior analyst when I left. Smart. Observant. Careful in the way people are when they know the room punishes mistakes. We recognized each other in line at a coffee shop. He looked lighter. We talked. About work. About life. About how strange it felt when the company stopped pretending everything was fine. They promoted me, he said, almost sheepish. After you left. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. I nodded. Are you happy? I asked. He thought about it. No, he said honestly. But I'm not afraid anymore. And that's new. That was enough. Later that night, I thought about all the people who stay too long because they mistake endurance for strength. Endurance keeps systems alive. Strength changes them. I never went back to that building. Never drove past it deliberately. Never checked the stock price. Some things don't deserve continued attention. The final confirmation that I'd done the right thing came months later, in a form I didn't expect. An envelope. Handwritten address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead. No branding. Just a short note. I used to think leadership meant being the loudest voice in the room. Now I know it means knowing who the room can't function without. I failed to see you. That failure cost more than money. I won't make it again. No signature. It didn't need one. I folded the paper once, then again, and placed it in a drawer with other things I no longer needed but wasn't angry enough to destroy. Closure isn't fireworks. It's absence. It's realizing you don't rehearse conversations with people who no longer control you. It's noticing that your shoulders don't tense when your phone rings. It's understanding that walking away wasn't quitting. It was graduating. I didn't win because I took them down. I won because I took myself out. And when I look back now, at the boardroom, the dismissal, the arrogance, I don't feel bitterness. I feel gratitude. They underestimated me just long enough for me to leave cleanly. That's the kind of mistake you only get to benefit from once. The company survived. I thrived. And somewhere behind me, a door closed. Not with anger. Not with regret. But with certainty. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day.